Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias. What we have here is a Shepherd Hills exclusive Case Copperhead. The Copperhead was the 2021 vault release from Case, and in this case the knife is the Kentucky Bluegrass Bone Peach Seed Jigged Copperhead, number 22817, 6249, and stainless steel. And we see here the date it was produced, May 27th, 2021. Now, before I actually get to talking about the nitty-gritty of this specific knife, I'm going to ramble on for about another 17 minutes talking about Copperheads, specifically the Case Copperhead, and compare it to a Roughrider Copperhead as well as a couple Steel Warrior Copperheads, and then I will eventually talk specifically about this knife again in about 17 minutes. So if all you're tuning in for is my review of this knife, I would jump forward about, well, by now 18 or so minutes and get that review. In the meantime, if you want to hear the ramble, stick around. It starts now. One of the last knives I bought in 2021 was a Case Copperhead. Now this was the vault knife for Case for 2021, so plenty of people have already done reviews of the knife. I wasn't sure if I was going to pick up a Copperhead or not. It's not a pattern that I tend to collect. I do sort of like it, but it's just not really high on my list of knives that I collect. In fact, I just have a few Chinese-made ones, and this is actually the first bona fide USA-made Copperhead knife that I have bought. Now, I believe that says a little bit about the Copperhead pattern and my willingness to purchase it, because it's the only one. A lot of people like the front bolster on it, and I get why that bolster is that way, so that when you're slipping it into your pocket, the blade is not going to catch on the material in your pocket. But to be honest, I've never seen that as a major problem when I've been dropping slip joints in my pockets, and I've been doing it for a long time. I know some of them stick up more than others, but that's part of the reason why the Copperhead is there, or that bump. I guess it really doesn't help because of the secondary blade here. It doesn't help prevent your hand from slipping up onto the blade. I suppose if it was a one-handed version, that the little bump would help stop your finger from slipping up on the blade. It does present a little bit of a finger choil there, but not really, no more than a regular knife. So the main purpose of it, as far as I know, is just so that the knife will drop into your pocket a little easier. And like I said, that's never really been an issue for me. And as you can tell, because of the way the handle is, well, it's never a problem on this end, because, well, you want the pointy part underneath the handle. So this side should always slip in smoothly. The only place you ever have the bump is up towards the front. Now, to better illustrate what I'm talking about, let's look at this Swell Center Hunter, or commonly called Coke bottle, made by Roughrider, compared to an old colonial Coke bottle knife. And you'll see what I'm talking about with the bump there. And this is the Copperhead bolster that they're talking about. Apparently it looks like the head of a Copperhead. I guess that's why they came out with that name, or at least that's one of the theories behind it. But you notice here the blade does not catch, but on this knife the blade definitely has that little bump there that it'll catch on, and that's where the blade locks up into the back here. So that's the whole purpose of the bump, is just to make it so that the blade can flip into the pocket a little easier. Now on the single bladed knife here, you see that it does kind of act a little bit as a guard, and you have a bit more of a forward choil there, even though that's not what it's there for. Really, you can see how it helps with a large single bladed knife, but that acting as a guard is kind of defeated as soon as you put a second blade on the knife. Any case, let's talk about the Case Copperhead and what I like about it and how well it is made. There are a couple minor flaws in my opinion. Other people might see them as a major flaw. And two other knives that are going to be featured in this video are a Roughrider Copperhead and a Steel Warrior Copperhead. So you can see a little bit of a comparison on the way Copperheads look from knife maker to knife maker, because as you can tell, no two of these knives look exactly the same. They're all different in some way, shape, or form. And for Copperhead collectors, that might be something that they really enjoy, the fact that it is going to vary from knife maker to knife maker, which it should. Another reason why I'm not as crazy about the standard trapper, because a trapper is a trapper is a trapper is a trapper, at least when it comes to that 4 1/8 inch standard trapper. It's going to look almost identical, and you cannot even tell the difference between knife maker unless you look at the tang stamp sometimes. So not so with the Copperhead. Now, according to All About Pocket Knives, a website devoted to, well, pocket knives, they have a great selection on the history of case knives. And in that, they say that these 49 pattern large Copperhead or big Copperheads were first introduced sometime around 1915 or thereabouts, maybe even earlier than that. So it is a pattern that has been in and out of the case lineup for a very, very long time. They also mention that the knife also picked up the nickname of the Vietnam knife. So I'm wondering if this was a pattern that was popular among service members who were in Vietnam back when that war was running. I don't know. They just mentioned that it was also known as a Vietnam knife. So if anyone knows more about that or why it was nicknamed that, it would be really interesting to hear more about it. Maybe Stuart Harvey knows a little bit about that. But in any case, it is a really nice pattern. And what I like about the case version is the blade choices that it has, at least the traditional blade choices that it has. I know now that the Wharncliffe is very popular. They have also made these with a Wharncliffe main blade. I'm not crazy about that. I really like just your standard case clip blade that they put on here. This is a 4-inch handle, so the clip blade comes in right at 2 7/8 inches, with a cutting edge that is just over 2.5 inches. So a nice size main blade. You can actually, as far as I can tell, this knife would be definitely legal carry even in the United Kingdom, as it is a slip joint. Now that's the main blade, and they do make some that are just a single blade version, and if I can get my hand on a single blade version of it, I might go ahead and pick up a second one. The secondary blade that is normally on here is a pin blade, and again, the blade is just over 2 inches long, with a cutting edge that is just over 1 3/4 inches. So nice little blades going on with it, and that is pretty much the way the Copperhead has been. At least with that's the way the majority of the ones that were issued from the vault will show up this time. Like I said, they also have some with a Wharncliffe main blade. I have seen those, and I I have seen some single-bladed versions of it. I have not been able to snag a single-bladed clip blade. I've seen single-bladed Wharncliffe ones, which I'm just not interested in. It would be nice to see a Wharncliffe for a secondary blade. That would be kind of nice, and they might be out there. I have not seen them. It was not a vault release that I was following closely. But note the shape of the handle here, and then let's compare it to the other two knives here. So we'll start with the Roughrider, and if you notice, the Roughrider knife has a distinctly different shape to the handle. Notice how the rear end of this, the rear pommel, kind of gets narrower, and it looks like it's built on a modified serpentine Stockman frame. Notice you still have the Copperhead top, which you have on the case knife, but notice how that bottom is, and notice how this is much straighter across the bottom, and this has a little bit of a drop in it, a serpentine shape, kind of like a sow belly or a serpentine Stockman. And notice the rounded bolster at the back, as opposed to the wider rounded bolster on the back of the Copperhead by Case. Also note that the length of the Roughrider one comes in right at about 3 5/8 inches, as opposed to the Case, which comes in right at 4 inches. Blade choices are also dramatically different. The back blade on here is a clip blade, similar to the front blade on the case knife, but it is a smaller clip blade. Obviously it would be, because the knife is shorter. So you've got a blade that's about 2 5/8 inches with a cutting edge that's right around 2 1/4. And again, we can go back, we see here almost 3 inches, cutting edge a little over 2.5 inches. So the cutting edge on this knife is the full length of the blade on the Roughrider Copperhead. Now the secondary blade on the Roughrider is a long skinning blade, or a straight skinning blade. You can also see it as a little bit of a drop there, and you notice the blade length is about the same as the other blade. They're both about the same length. So if you're looking for a knife with two long blades, then the Roughrider would be the way to go. I don't know if Case has ever made a Copperhead with the straight skinner blade or not. That would be an interesting knife to see, but as far as I know, I have not seen it that way. But that is one of the reasons why I prefer the Copperhead over a Trapper, because you don't find a spay blade on it. Now, as for the Frost Steel Warrior, I've got a couple of different ones of these. What you will notice right away is a much more pronounced bend in the Copperhead there, which allows for a wide blade to be put on a relatively skinny handle, and also a relatively small knife. And most of the Frost Copperheads are smaller than the Roughrider knives too. You see here that this one comes in right at 3 1/4 inches long, and it has two blades. This one is one of them that has a kind of an interesting locking system, because this blade will lock using the secondary blade there. But as you can tell, despite having the cutout, it really doesn't keep your hand from sliding up. Like I said, now this blade locks the main blade, so if you push down on this blade, it will release the blade here, so it will close. Despite that, when you're using the knife and the fact that you are gripping that blade, the lock works pretty well on it. You can give a little bit of pressure on there, and it's not going to give the blade a release. You really have to press down quite a bit for the blade to be released. So the locking mechanism does work to a degree. Now, like I said, this is one version of the Copperheads by Frost. in the Steel Warrior lineup. And in this case, the secondary blade is a Wharncliffe blade, which I would like to see on there. The gimmick of the locking portion, that's not as big of a deal. It's nice that it has a lock, but like I said, it's not that big of a deal. It's more of a gimmick than anything else as far as I'm concerned. Now, the more common Frost Copperhead is this one here, and that in this case it has blades similar to the Case Copperhead, in that you have a pin blade, and you notice it's a fairly wide pin blade, and it's also coming in right under 2 inches with a cutting edge right at 1.5 inches. So compared to the Case, which is a little over 2, you can see the difference there. But notice that it is a pretty wide blade, a little shorter but wide. And then the secondary blade you have on it is the clip blade, and obviously a much smaller clip blade, 2.5 inches versus 3 inches, cutting edge right at 2.25 inches. So it's got a less of a cutting edge and a less length on it, mainly because, as you can tell, this one is also still right at 3.25 inches. So that's the difference between the Frost Steel Warrior Copperheads and the Roughrider Copperheads compared to the Case Copperhead. The Case Copperhead is going to be a significantly larger knife when you consider it as a pocket knife. Yeah, the Case Copperhead comes in at 4 inches versus 3 5/8 inches, or 3.25 inches. So you're talking about a larger knife, but still a knife that has blades that would be UK legal, coming in at a blade, the large blade only being about 3 inches long, a little less than 3 inches. So what about the knife overall? How does this knife compare, in quality, in the build and everything else? And also, what about this new box that they're using? Okay, I hope you enjoyed the ramble. If you didn't, you probably just jump forward to right here, and let's talk about this knife specifically. Yes, it has 2 flaws in it, at least 2 that I see. Neither of them is a major flaw as far as I'm concerned. The first is right there, if you notice, there is a gap between the brass liner and one of the back springs. It is a minor gap, you see it right there, and goes down to, say, right around there. So it's about an inch and an inch-half long gap there. It's not a big deal. Doesn't really bother me at all, but I wanted to point it out because I know there are those who will nitpick the death out of a Case knife, so I'm pointing it out for you so you can say, Case knives suck, I'll never buy one. And there you also have the blade centering, which is not perfect, especially on the pin blade. The pin blade is definitely a little close to the pile side of the knife, or the back side of the knife. And if you notice, the front blade, the clip blade, does favor the shield side of the knife. Neither one of these knives is experiencing any kind of blade rub, and when you open the blades, they are nice and tight. There is absolutely no wobble in them. Pretty good tension on the back spring there. You have a half stop on the pin blade. I would say the pull on the pin blade is right around a 4 or a 5. So it's not really strong, but it's strong enough to keep that blade in place and usable. Same thing with the clip blade. You also have the half stop working really well. Again, the pull is probably around a 4 or 5. You have a little more resistance on this one simply because the blade is a little longer, but it is good. And will it slap on my fingers? I would not do that, but it does stop. My usual is like so. I'm not a big fan of half stops. I know a lot of people love them. It is just a feature of a knife. I would have been just as happy with this knife without the half stops, but for the folks who love half stops, this one pops pretty good. So the walk and talk is quite excellent on both blades. And if you notice, I know where the nail nick is on the back side here, so I can easily grab it and pull it open, even from the front side of the knife. Obviously, the more normal way is to grab it from the back side, but excellent walk and talk on both blades. As for the finish, well, first of all, I really love the coloration of the Kentucky bluegrass bone. That is the main reason I decided to go ahead and buy a Copperhead. And you see the little denting there where the peach seed kind of dragged off into the bolsters, and they matched it up quite nicely with the dents into the bolster, the nickel silver bolsters, which are nice and shiny, and it feels really nice there. Same with the back side. Pins are flush. The back pin, because of where it's hitting into the peach seed jig bone, is actually slightly recessed, so it is not proud for a change, but still quite functional. And if you notice, the lineup with the liners on the covers is perfect. There is no gapping between the brass liners and the covers. Very smooth all around there. Like I said, the only gap you have is between the brass liner and the back spring, and that is not an issue to me. I know it is for other people. I don't think it really affects the functionality of the knife in any way, shape, or form. What would have upset me is if there was a gap between the liner and the cover. I do not like to see a gap between the bone and the cover. I see that as an unacceptable sign on just about any knife. A little more acceptable when the knives don't cost that much. But on a $50 some odd knife, I want that cover to be firm against the brass liners, and they have done a great job with that. So all in all, I'm very impressed with the quality of this knife. I think it is really well done. Yes, the blades are not perfectly lined up, but they're also not that bad. And as you can see, Kitty is agreeing with me. She is saying over and over, yes, the blades are fine. Stop complaining about the blades not being perfectly centered. My food bowl is never centered, but I still eat from my food bowl, which is what she wants me to do in a minute. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep talking. The shield is also, really because of it being in the peach seed bone, I can't tell if it is recessed or not, but I do know one thing: it is not proud. Might be a little bit recessed in some areas simply because of the way the jigging is done, but at no point on either end can my finger catch on it. And quite frankly, I would much rather have it be slightly recessed into all that jigging than have it proud, because then it's more likely to catch on something and fall off. It does seem to be well glued in place. Yes, it is not pinned. It is just glued on there. But it is a nice nickel silver shield. It is one of their oval shields with the Case long tail emblem over the double X. And as you can see, you have a 9 dot for 2021, and it does look like it is actual dots now, just 9 dots. What I would like to have seen in this knife would be a bare head end. I don't know if Case does any bare head Copperheads. That would be nice, though, to have a bolsterless end here and the Copperhead top. In any case, I can live with the bolster on the back side here. Notice it is completely unadorned, just a nice clean bolster, and I am beginning to be a big fan of a nice unadorned bolster, which you see in Case and also, quite frankly, in Steel Warrior line of knives. So the plain bolsters are looking a little bit better these days than the ring bolster or the pinch bolsters. I know those are additional works that are done to the bolster, but I think and I think part of the reason I like the plain bolsters more now is simply because I'm not encountering them nearly as much as I am with all the adornments that you're finding on Roughriders. Another plus for the case knives. Also, if you notice here, this is nicely burnished here. It's not perfectly squared off, but it is rounded a little bit, and that makes it feel a little bit better in the hand. Could have been rounded a little better. I've had better rounding on some case knives, but this one's nice enough. There is not a sharp edge going, and that's where you can also really see the Kentucky bluegrass color there. Yes, you're not imagining that it is a green. Kentucky bluegrass is green, even though they call it bluegrass. So overall, I'm very impressed with this knife. I really am happy that I picked one up. Like I mentioned earlier, if I can find a single bladed copperhead with a clip blade, also with handle material that I'm happy with, I will probably pick one of those up. What I would have liked to have seen is Case putting out a Copperhead, possibly with a secondary smaller Wharncliffe blade. I have seen the ones with the long Wharncliffe blade. I do not like that one at all. But it is a nice addition to my Copperheads in that it is different than the ones that you find from Roughrider. From Roughrider or from Steel Warrior or Frost. And that is one of the main reasons I picked it up, because it was a different type of Copperhead. If this would have been the same style as a Roughrider Copperhead, I probably would have just passed on it. But because it was different, because of the length being 4 inches long, with the blade just under 3 inches, I thought I would go ahead and grab one and take a risk on picking up another Copperhead, seeing how it's not a pattern that I use a lot or collect. But now I'm kind of regretting it. If I wish a few other people made the Case style Copperhead, because this is a pretty nice knife and one that might see more pocket time simply because of these blade options with the 3-inch clip blade and the 2-inch pin blade. Any case, I hope you enjoyed that part of it. Now let's take a look at this little box here, but not too long of a look because it is just a box. This is the new boxes I think that they're going to be coming out with, the black and tan case boxes with WR Case and Son there, the big Longtail C case there over the XX, tested XX and tested XX, and then this logo on the back here. And it's a pretty cool change in boxes, and I kind of like this one. I like this one better than many of the other boxes that I have seen from Case. Is that partly because it's new and novel? Probably, but it was a nice change of pace to see a new box from Case. And so that will be added into my collection of Case boxes. It is, I don't collect every box. I don't keep every box for a Case knife, but when I see a new box, one that I haven't had before, that's usually one that I will grab and keep. So yeah, I'm kind of happy that not only did I pick up the Copperhead, but it came with a new box. Anyway, stick around now for a very brief slideshow, and I'll let you go. And now you also know why I waited, or why I warned you that you might want to jump ahead 17 minutes to get to the review of the knife. Anyway, let's stick around for some slides at least, seeing how you've been here this long. let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with the Pious. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.